G'day everyone, Dan from Convos here, and today we're actually having a chat with Dr. Jason Hilder, and we're talking about communal living arrangements. It's a great chat, you're going to get a lot out of it. Make sure you sit down and really take this one in. I think it might blow your mind with a few of the ideas that we come up with and have a bit of a chat about. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Talk soon. Hi everyone, welcome to Convos with Dan. I'm your host Dan Vanderhoek, and we are here out at Crystal Waters with my guest, my very good friend Dr. Jason Hilder.
Hey Dan.
Jason, thank you for coming along, mate. As a community development specialist, that's a bit of a mouthful, and we're going to learn a bit more about what that means.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's taken me a while to come and understand what it is that I do and what I can tell people that I do. Because to me, a community development specialist, there's not too many of them. My plan, my passion, and what I've studied to do is to actually help groups of people form new communities or existing communities improve how they interact and how they get on with each other, and how they live in their community.
Mate, I think that's a really it's quite an in-depth thing that you're trying to do, and I think we need to probably take it back a step further before we really get into that and talking about community itself. You know, community is a word that gets bandied around all the time. Yeah. You know, we've always got these different foundations which are supporting our community, and they're this and that and they're, you know, so you've got that general sense of where people are living and how they're living together, and the idea of the neighbourhood. We've got, you know, as a suburban idea. Yeah. Then we've got your different areas like that. Where you're actually specialising in is actual, you know, more communal living and people living together. That's right?
Yeah, that's right, Dan. It's focused more on communities where people intentionally come together rather than by chance. So the normal planning model that you know, a suburb or even a town is designed. Yeah. Master plan and then built over years, and then people come to live there, and all of a sudden you got these buildings, or not all of a sudden, but over time you got these buildings, and the community interaction, the people interaction happens over time. Yeah. Whereas an intentional community, and when I say intentional community, there's ranges from eco-villages to co-housing to religious communes to, there's a whole spectrum of how people consciously choose to live together. Or live near each other, I should say, because that's more what it's about. That's coming the other end, where there's a sense of, hey, we want to live near each other for a purpose, whatever that purpose might be, and then the structures come, and then the buildings come, and how they interact and things like that. It's actually quite the reverse of the process. So I agree with you. The word community is a very, very diverse one, and yeah, what we're talking about today is the experience I've had at looking at intentional communities around the place. So
Jason, I want to talk about the actual practicalities of that aspect as well. But first up, how did you get to this? You know, this has been a bit of a journey for you.
It sure has, yeah. I was 31, 32, and I had a corporate job in Amsterdam working for a bank, and we had a pretty good lifestyle, being well educated and travelling and middle management. And one day I heard that we were going to have a baby, and I looked out the window. I was so excited for this; it was a great change. And I looked out the window and thought, what do I want for my children that come after? You know, what do I want for? I didn't know it was my daughter. We only found out when she was born that she was a girl. But I really started asking some soul questions, because working in the bank, I was in a corporate environment, quite wealthy, quite privileged in many ways. And I started to, I've always had a bit of a hankering for organic veggies and getting on with the neighbours, and how do you grow things together, how do you grow community. And that bit of soul searching led me to Findhorn Foundation in Scotland, which is an intentional community of about 800 people now, that started as a group of hippies, really, in a sand dune in cold northern Scotland. But from there, they've they've built a whole movement, and that was my first experience. So
that's some pretty substantial growth. From a small handful of people to 800. That's
800 people who live there.
Yeah.
People who've been through Findhorn. I was one of those. I went there to do some courses about what is communal living, who am I, those really deep soul-searching questions. There would be hundreds of thousands, I don't know about millions, but certainly hundreds of thousands of people have been through Findhorn, and that spurned a whole heap of other communities around the world, like Tamera in Portugal, Siebenlinden and Seg in Germany, Oroville in India, and a number of communities in the United States and Canada. So, and these are the ones that are in the Western world. There's a number in the Eastern world as well, where people consciously come together.
Yeah,
that was many years ago, and since that time I've been really passionate, or it actually opened up my mind that there is another way of living. And ever since then, I've been both searching, researching, and finding as well.
Yeah. Look, I think personally, I mean, the idea of it for me is, I think it's a beautiful idea. I think it's the idea of people coming together and actually, working together to a certain extent to essentially move forward and to survive. Not there's that limited requirement for outside involvement. I think there's that idea of being able to say, well, look, we are one and we're going to grow together. I think that's an exciting idea. I can see it being fraught with potholes and pitfalls.
What about big deep pits?
Yeah,
as well.
That's right. I mean, if you the idea of having something that's set up as a community where you've got a group of people together, regardless of size, there's certain disagreements that are going to come up.
Yeah.
And that can be from tiny little things which then get blown out of proportion through to quite divisive differences.
Yeah.
I can see that being having some concerns, and so in your experience, have you seen that sort of stuff happen?
In every community that I've visited, I live now in Crystal Waters. There's that division in every community, and the communities that I've helped create as well. And I also know that I've lived in a normal suburban street, and there's arguments with the people next door over trees hanging over the fence or dogs.
So even despite having that same goal, there is still these hurdles.
And what I have found is that the communities that seem to have a clearer vision, pretty much a why, they were able to be get through their differences a lot more. And whenever there was, be it disagreements that then became conflict, they could stop and come back to, why are we here? What's our vision? What are we doing this for? Because that was the unifying thing. And that from that place, you can then, in my experience, what I observe is you could then go, okay, now we can go back to the detail of the problem, what's going on. Conflict.
That's interesting. That the idea of finding your why, that translates through and transcends so many different aspects of our lives. We were taught that very much in the business world as well. And once you find your why, it gives you your reason for getting up every day, for doing even the smallest little mundane tasks. There's a video I saw from a guy called Simon Sinek who actually does one for business coaching, which is finding your why. And that was very, very transformative for me. Knowing why you do what you do. And that's that obviously moves forward in, like I said, these other areas of your life as well.
Well, that what you've just touched on, you can find it in a sports team. You can find it in a business or a school, or sometimes in a family, but very rarely in a neighbourhood, and very rarely in a community. And I feel that in this time when we're having a number of crises like housing unaffordability and social disconnection, that we actually need to find ways to come back to, well, why does a group of people want to live in the same street, for instance, or why would they want to live in a community like Crystal Waters or other intentional communities?
Yeah. So, in going around and studying and seeing, different communities all around the world, has that been your source of? Have you actually brought that education side of things to what you're doing? You've got a doctorate.
Yes, yeah. Well, firstly, before that, about 10 years ago, I was knocking on the door of local government in Brisbane and a few state government departments and a couple of architects and saying, hey, co-housing, eco-villages, they're answers. And the response I'd often get was, that's great. It's really good. You're a little bit ahead of your time, or maybe that's utopian. And I was getting frustrated with that. So I decided to, rather than keep getting doors closed, I thought it's time to go and find out all I can. So I went back to university, and amazing that I both had a thesis topic approved to study intentional community living arrangements, and also I was able to win a scholarship to study that, and with some travel funding. So for me it was like the universe saying, yes, this is needed and go for it. So I immersed in a PhD to study communities, and I'm now complete, and in December I'll be the third attempt at graduating, because we've not been able to graduate because of COVID, but that's about to happen. So yeah. And
congratulations on that anyway. So it's just the idea of being able to complete that. That's fantastic. And so that would have given you an incredible amount of insight.
Yeah, very much so. And I felt it was important to be able to have that grounded knowledge as well as experience living in communities.
Yeah.
And a little bit of, maybe not kudos, but a bit of practical, righto, things aren't completely working the way that they are in the current housing model. What's another model that we can start to bring on the table?
Yeah.
And,
So what sort of things have you done in terms of getting your doctorate, doing your PhD for that? What sort of practical stuff have you done? Let's get into it a little bit.
Great question. So firstly, I in two parts. I looked at the Australian Bureau of Statistics and also other data to find exactly how many people lived communally in Australia, and which part of that were living in intentional communities. And I actually thought that'd be a pretty easy thing to do, but it took me nearly a year to investigate that.
Okay. And
the findings, so that was one area of the study, and the findings of that showed that it had never been studied before in Australia. And the paper that myself and colleagues published, it's now being a lot of citations, and it found that, or we found that around a fifth of Australia's population lives communally in some form or another.
Wow.
So retirement villages or intentional communities like this, or share housing, or multiple family households and things like this, that is actually a bit off the radar, particularly when the predominant housing model is 3-bedroom, brick house, mum, dad and 2 kids, or a unit or something like that. So that was one thing. The other was that it's actually increasing over 3 different census enumerations, so that there's a trend towards more communal living. So that was the first part of my study. That was actually behind the computer a lot and analysing data, and which is something I can do, but I love the getting out and saying good day to people. Yeah. So from there, I travelled through 8 different communities here in Australia, through South Australia and Tasmania. Yeah. And as part of my research, and then interviewed people, was part of community meals, community gatherings or meetings, things like that. And then I went to 4 countries in Europe, and went to 5 different large communities in Europe. And I chose the best in Europe that I am aware of, and once again interviewed and lived in the community for a day or 2, or one place I lived in for 2 weeks. So it was very much to really get me out there and see firsthand different types of communal living, intentional communal living. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of people out there who may not have seen this as an option. heard the idea, and I think very much like myself, until somewhat recently, you hear the idea of the hippie commune that's been that gets bandied around, not really even knowing what that is and what that means. It was until I came here for the first time that I actually was asking some questions, and was asking some questions from the real estate perspective, and saying, well, how is this set up? How is this arranged? From a legal standpoint, because you get all the different. We're seeing this on a daily basis, where people are coming to us and saying, look, we've got these properties and we want to set up multiple houses on this. This is a daily conversation I'm having, and it has increased the number of times we're having that conversation. It has increased over the last 18 months. Yeah. I think the bit of turmoil in the world has given people a bit more of a push in this direction, saying that, well, what we've been doing isn't working, or it hasn't been working for us, so let's look at alternative ways. But there's also that idea of, well, looking back at what's important. And I think what's important having that connection with people, having that connection again with family, has certainly grown.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably more of a loaded statement rather than a question. But I think what I want to start talking about a little bit is, what actually is involved in an intentional community.
Sure.
How is that setup done, and what is it really?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Before speaking to that, I wanted to talk about the hippie commune. I'll come to that question,
cool.
but because you mentioned about the hippie commune image, in the 70s and 80s was the counterculture movement in Australia, and we had the Aquarius Festival in northern New South Wales, and that was Vietnam, and this was happening around the world as well. And that was the moment, and Findhorn in Scotland and a number of other places around the world, this counterculture sort of getting back to the country and rejecting society.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very sustainable. It was great high ideals, and there was a lot of hippiness, which was against the system. And that image has stayed until today.
Well, that's the image that everyone sees is the idea of the pot smoking, naked, free love. Yeah, that's the negative idea that we're all given to say this is bad, because obviously it's anti-culture.
Yes. So fast forward 40 years, and another thing, land was very cheap then.
Yep.
So a bunch of people could get together without much regulation and just build a shanty town, really, and live and function well or not, but they could do it. We can't do that anymore.
So was that also a limit in essentially regulation as to your building codes and your classifications and things like that?
Good question, Dan. I'm not 100% sure. I'd surmise that it was actually that because these hippie communes weren't following any real regulations of society, so they're doing their own thing, and therefore things could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
With fire safety, sewage controls, or making sure that people were living in sanitary conditions and things like that. So I imagine that had an effect. Fast forward to today, we have a lot more regulations in place, and we've got some really amazing architects and designers and community builders for over 40 years who've come up with some great models, like the co-housing design, which is very much an urban model of people collectively living together, a little bit like a retirement village in a way, and eco-villages, which are, once upon a time they were out in the middle of nowhere, like Crystal Waters Permaculture Village, but are starting to become, hang on, there's something in this eco-village world, and the standard of housing is increasing, the standard of interconnections. Like here, we've just had a team who put in world-class internet connection that's even better than the surrounding areas in an eco-village. So the standards are really stepping up. And I often hear that hippie question, and I answer, well, come out and have a look. And you might find the hippiness, but you might also find everyday people living in everyday homes just closer together and choosing to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was the first part of the question. I think the second part, I've forgotten now. Sorry.
Well, the second part was actually, how do you go about setting something like this up?
Yep. Yep. I've grappled with this question a lot, and the good thing is that myself and a lot of other researchers and writers in the world are coming up with answers to this.
Yeah.
It's very much a process. If you were to start a company or a sports team or a school or whatever, you would need to follow a process. And what I have found is people will contact me and say, we got land together, there's 10 of us and we got $5,000 each. Can we just go and buy a block of land? And I say, whoa.
Yeah.
Yes, you could do that, but chances are something will go wrong within 12 months.
Yeah.
You'll argue about something, or somebody will have to leave, or whatever it is. And I always recommend people to come back to the beginning place. Who are you and why do you want to do this?
Doing it?
And then from the why, you can start talking, well, how will we get on with each other? So some steps, there's about 15 that I've identified, and it's growing now. And I've just put together some a workshop on this, and myself and a couple of colleagues, we're getting it together to expand that workshop to make it even more detailed.
Yep.
But it's generally around why are you doing this? What is the place that you want to live, and what's it look like, the buildings, how many cars, that sort of thing. That leads to the legal model.
Yep.
How are you going to own it together? How are you going to finance it? And then conflict. We talked about conflict before. It's really important to have some way of getting on with each other and working things out. And decision-making. Decision-making and conflict resolution or conflict processes are, I reckon, are often really forgot in most organisations. And to me, they're a language. They're, okay, we've got a difference of opinion. How are we going to deal with this? Righto, we need to go through a process. And without having those sort of key foundational steps in place, there's a pretty high likelihood that you and a mob of people are going to get together and then something's go wrong and then you go left and right.
Yeah, so you see that happen in the world all over the place. The idea is so many things going on out there, and the idea that people don't seem to be able to have a conversation. In a lot of cases at the moment. As soon as there's differing opinions, well, you're wrong, so you're an idiot. I'm right, and that's all there is to it. So that sort of thing can obviously be quite difficult to accept if you haven't got a system in place. If you haven't got something there ready that's there to say, well, this is how we're going to work through this. Because you can very much, you get a bunch of mates together who enjoy each other's company, but when you go home, you go and you do your own things, and you say to your partner, wasn't he an idiot? When you're living together, or whether it's in close proximity, those sort of things have a habit of creeping up. The idea of being able to say, well, no, we'll be right. It's not going to work like that. So
it's something I've had this own experience in my life. I have been in family. I've lived in a farming community. I've lived in a city. Generally, there's rules about how you live beside each other that society determines. Stepping into an intentional community, or even a collaborative living arrangement, or something that's a little unusual, you're forming the agreements yourself. And I made the assumption that I'd be okay at it. I get on with people generally, so I'd be okay at it. It took me 3 instances of living in community to realise that I didn't have the skills. I was a problem in my behaviour, and my ability to talk with people was a problem in 2 communities. And I learnt from that I had to go out and actually do a bit of re-education of, or what does it mean about communication? So I've invested in and have explored nonviolent communication, which is a tool for communicating effectively, and circular governance models, which to me, what does that mean? But make decisions together as a group. I had no idea in it. And to be able to take the emotionality out of discussions when it needed to be. And I feel it's really important. I've done it myself, but I feel it's really important for a group of people who are sitting down having a cup of tea saying, you know what, perhaps we could buy a block of land together. One of the costs or investment in time is let's go and do a group process training.
Yeah.
Let's go and do some communication about conflict resolution, because it will save you stress and headaches, everything, and also money later on.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning, I feel that's an important thing. And to me, it's a cost, just like you're going to build a building or you're going to put sewage in, also include in the cost some group processes. Yeah.
Well, I think that makes sense. It's foundation making. You know, you can start building a house directly on the ground. It's going to last a little while, but you need to get your foundations right in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what that is, and it's getting the emotional side of it all, the process in place first.
Yeah.
And then building on that.
Yeah. I'm so keen about this that I'm myself and a couple of... So I'm an ambassador for the Global Eco-Village Network and the Australian division of it, and also a member of Co-Housing Australia and a member of the Collaborative Housing Research Association group, I think we're called. We're just forming, and within this, there's this knowledge that's being shared and built upon, and in each one of those, there's a sense that it's time to advocate. It's time to go and knock on the door of government again, particularly now that we're in COP, the climate talks in Glasgow. It's time for collective action about better housing models and things like that. And I feel it's important, not just that this is a good idea, but it's really important to challenge the existing housing paradigm and say, we're going to continue on that, but how about we also have another option too?
Yeah. So, in terms of when you're in that situation, you're at that point. You're saying, right, well, you've gone through the process. Is there a set standard as to how you're going to split up I don't like using the word should, but how is best to actually split up an area? You're looking at a certain size for each person. Now you're looking at fencing, or you're looking at anything like that to give you your own space.
What I had seen in communities was that generally the self-contained living area, so that's your home, but you got everything in, maybe a washing machine, maybe not, but generally everything else is quite small, perhaps European or Asian size, like 70 to 90 square metres. That's your inner world. That's your world where you can shut the door. This is a co-housing model, I should say. It's not something where 10 people live in one building. That's a very different thing. That's co-living. Just to really clarify, we're talking about a collective on land. So around that size, but then you have the ability to walk out your front door, and all of a sudden all that land area that would have gone into a big footprint of a house is actually in collective garden. And that can be varying size depending on the affordability and things like that. I would definitely recommend in every community that I visited that worked well, they had a community kitchen and a community dining room where everybody ate. And most of them had a meal at least once a week collectively, sometimes twice a week for the whole community. And it didn't mean it was a regimented thing. You had to show up. It was by choice. But it gave that opportunity for people to come and share a meal together regularly at an easygoing pace and connect and how you going, have a check-in. And so those three elements are pretty important. The co-housing model puts all the cars at the outside and shared laundry and things like that. So I believe that could be done on it can be done on a housing block. I would recommend 2 or 3 housing blocks together. Here in Queensland, we've got legislation that makes this difficult. Other states too, but here in Queensland, for some reason, we're a bit draconian. So going back to the original, why do you want to do this? Actually determines, do I want to live near 10 families or I want to live near 2? That's a big decider, and that can actually affect then how you design your place.
So in terms of, you said about, the Queensland laws, in particular, is that a state government thing, or is that a local council?
So first, before I answer this one, I want to clarify, originally I'm a farmer.
Yep.
And I studied horticulture and then natural resources, and then I've studied a social urban sociology degree. So I'm not a planner or a legal person, but what I've been able to gather, so I'd thoroughly recommend always ask the planner, the architect and the certifier. But what I have in my own reading and what I've heard is that the state determines the regulations of things like an eco-village, which actually isn't even on their cards, or the closest is probably a caravan park or a retirement village. And then it's up to each council to interpret that legislation and then make their own codes.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a little bit of flexibility in the state regulations, but it's actually the council that is the one that we need to deal with, because they're the ones going to be certifying blocks for how that they have housing in them.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky. It's a little bit of a how long is a piece of string, and I actually think with the housing affordability crisis, we're seeing 0% rental vacancies in Sunshine Coast. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
We really need other models, and I think councils can actually partner in this and say, and developers, and say, well, look, what are some of the components of communal living that we can incorporate that aren't gated communities or company managed communities. These are communities that residents themselves live in and manage and care for and collectively own.
Yes, I mean, for someone for a council who's looking at taking that step and looking at saying, well, look, let's look into this a bit further. I mean, that could be, aside from quite innovative, that could actually be quite beneficial to the council, to the local area, in terms of attracting more people. That would then be actually helping not only building a community in itself, or building a couple of communities in themselves, but actually enhancing everything that's around it as well, enhancing the wider community as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of you run workshops, where you go through this sort of stuff in much more detail, and I'm getting aware of time because we are. Yeah, we do have a bit of a limit, and I could pick your brain about this all day.
Yeah,
but to get more in depth, you run workshops, don't you?
Yes, I've just been developing this for about a year and a half with a couple of colleagues to develop a one-day workshop to start with. I started with an information session, which was a couple of hours, and people were, "This is great. We want more." So I developed a one-day basic foundational workshop that literally lists those 15 steps and go through to understand what's possible in each one. The example is the legal models. Is it multiple occupancy or is it a company title, community land trust, or things like this? Not to go into it in detail, but to list those. So the one-day course really gives each person who comes a, wow, that's a roadmap to start right through to moving in.
Yeah.
From that, I've hosted one of those workshops 2 weeks ago, and the feedback I got, and why I'm coming up to Gympie to host a workshop there, is, wow, we need this, we need more of it.
Yeah.
From that, a couple of colleagues in Gen Australia were getting together to develop a 7-day workshop, which is taking it that's next step, which is, righto, they're the 15 steps. Let's really delve into each step. So at the end of it, a group of 5 or however many people could come out and say, this is our roadmap.
We're ready, let's do it.
And we're ready, now we can go and do it.
Yeah. So we're going to be having that, we're going to be advertising that through our Facebook as well, because we're going to be working together to bring that workshop through to Gympie. And I think it's just that's the one-day one. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and I think we're going to get a lot out of it. So keep an eye out on the Facebook on the Facebook. How's that? Me and the social medias. We're going to have the links out there for that as well. But you'll have a link through your website as well.
Yeah.
That's jasonhilder.com.
jasonhilder.com. I'm just looking to, because it's not about me, even though the knowledge is with me at the moment. It's about sharing it. So it's about to become a a different website that's actually more community focused. But definitely jasonhilder.com, you can find information about the workshops there.
Yeah.
And also on Gen Australia, Global Eco Village Network Australia, Global Eco Village Network Australia.org.au. You can find info about that.
Wonderful. And we'll have all those links through the show notes and through the comment section of the various places we put this as well. Yeah. I think one of the other great things that you can do, you touched on it very, very briefly in terms of the idea of the housing crisis and the housing affordability. That's the fact that there is no rentals available, and that's up and down. It's all throughout Australia. With that side of things, also comes to the fact that people aren't able to necessarily say, right, that's it. We're just going to go and buy a block. We're going to live more simply. We're going to do this and do that. I started talking to you about a mate of mine who's a barber, and he runs his own business. He's got a couple of little kids. He reached out to me over Instagram, and I've known him for a couple of years now, but reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, look, man, I love what you're talking about, but I'm never going to be able to afford to do any of this. I was able to come back to him and say, look, mate, there are other options available. And one of those I see is communal living. Getting in, it's you're sharing not only the resources and space, but you're sharing the costs. You're sharing essentially everything. It becomes a much more affordable option for a lot of people. Yeah. And I think that's something that really needs to get out there. Yeah. And I think that's something that governments, councils need to take on board, because they need to do something. Yeah. There's tent cities being set up for people who can't find a place to live, people living in and out of their cars. We need other options. And that's not because they don't have any financial backing either. It's not because they don't have any work. It's not because of anything like that. We need other options. Yeah. And I think what you can help provide is a bit of a roadmap.
Yeah. The just preliminary calculations that I and a couple of colleagues had sat down, that instead of buying a $400,000 to $600,000 home on your own 3-bedroom in a suburb or a new development, to get a little bit larger piece of land and get together with 4 or 5 people with really good agreements and a legal model like a company title or a tenancy in common, where it's very, very clear you can get in and you can get out. You're talking $100,000 to $200,000, meaning that you can still have a place to live, part of a collective. It could be a large collective or a small collective. If you wanted to do it tiny houses, it's even cheaper, and if you wanted to live in yurts, it's even cheaper again. Yeah. The challenge that I've often seen is, well, how do people get a mortgage for that? And that's the problem with a couple of the legal models. Company title allows that you can get a loan specifically on your own share of the property. Again, I'm not an expert in this. I am connected with professionals who can advise on that a lot more. But to me, it's you don't need to share everything. Like I choose, I'm choosing in the future to do car sharing, co-working space. So I'm cutting down on a car by myself. I choose to live work in a building with others, and choosing things like laundry and stuff like that collectively. So they're all big savings. And if you do that well and you get on with each other and you have good processes when you don't get on well, you can actually live a lot cheaper. And I'm really inspired by the European models on this, where they're cutting down on the cost of not just the purchase, but the ongoing costs, because they're sharing electricity costs or internet costs or car costs or things like that. And a further one, which really surprised me from the literature, there's a lot of literature looking at the elder co-housing. Yep. So elders who get together and do this. Councils and health providers are finding it's actually cheaper to support co-housing communities because the elders are looking after themselves.
Wow.
So they're caring for each other, making meals, not always, but they're cutting down on that need for the external carer to come in or the doctor to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning or things like that, because they've got a friend next door that, even though they're not married to or related to, they've got a friend that they're potentially living next door the rest of their life with. And
quite often that support worker is literally the big part of what they're doing is company.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah.
Just being there to say good day and have a cup of tea and how you going.
Yeah.
And a check-in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mate, I think that's really, really exciting. And you know, I think when someone's able to, when someone or a councillor or a government, a local government, is able to take that risk, well, it's not even a risk, able to take that leap and actually get in and get something happening, get something done, lay some of the groundwork out, that's when, once it becomes more of an accepted norm, that's when the idea of the banks being able to come out and being more willing to loan, being more willing to lend, it becomes that that new normal. It just takes the first one, really.
Yeah.
It takes those first steps. And look, to think that we might be headed that way, I think is extremely exciting.
Yes, and we are seeing it in other states of Australia, except the Territory, where co-housing is becoming more and more common, and councils and certifiers and architects are dealing with the processes of that. Here in Queensland, we still don't have a co-housing village. We've got a number of eco-villages like this that are on the edge of that, but I think the co-housing movement, either urban or rural, is going to drive that change, because it is more affordable, and it's proving all around the world for now 30 years to be an equitable model and an affordable model. So I'm excited about the movement, and I really look forward to being part of the process to help not just educate, but help groups to get through some of those hurdles.
Certainly. Mate, look, for people who have been listening to this and been checking this out or watching the YouTube, you know, to be able to find out some more information and take that next steps into looking forward, you know, you've got your website, you've got the Global Eco Village Network website. Where else can people be looking to find some more info?
From our group, there's obviously social media pages on this, particularly in the Co-Housing Australia and Global Eco Village Network. And of course, there's a whole lot of communication and posts happening on off-the-grid communities or sustainable community villages Facebook page. There's a lot of talk and a lot of interest in this, but I would suggest the Global Eco Village Network and Co-Housing Australia.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, Jason, look, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We go through 6 questions at the end with our 6 and 60.
Can we also include in that a checkout?
We can, absolutely.
Great.
We'll jump through these and then we'll check out at the end, eh?
Okay.
All right, beauty. So 6 and 60, 6 questions in 60 seconds.
Sure.
So we try and rip through them.
Okay.
All right? Not like you're on the clock or anything, but you are.
No pressure.
What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Walking more gently and purposefully.
And what's the best advice you've ever received?
Start as you mean to proceed.
Fantastic. What's the one thing you're most fired up about today?
Really concerned about the state of our environment and how our government is not really toeing the line, and housing unaffordability.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's another podcast topic we should be doing later on. Yeah. So, if you could recommend one book or podcast to our audience, what would that be and why?
Creating Community by Diana Leaf Christian, showing how to start and how to. So the things I'm doing from an American perspective, and giving some real grist to some of the challenges and also the positives.
So what personal goals are you hoping to achieve over the next 12 months?
I would like to be interfacing with government at least every quarter at a state level, with Jen and also on my own bat. To be advocating for more communal living, and personally to be helping at least 5 small groups of 5 or 10 people making a collective plan for how they're going to live together.
Right. The mystery question. So if you could invite anyone from history to be in a communal living situation with you, who would that be and why?
not Hippocrates, Pythagoras, because he set up an intentional community in ancient times, purposeful intentional community, and based upon the teachings of Socrates about an ideal world and things like that. Unfortunately, he had slaves, and he had, there was a lot of racism and things like that, but he was one of the founders of in the ancient world that we know of anyway, that had views on communal living.
So more than just the triangles.
More than just the triangles, that's right.
Fantastic. But Jason, thank you. Look, mate, again, thank you so much. And as we finish off, let's close out, hey?
Yeah, okay. And a quick checkout. And I will model that. So I'm checking out with a level of excitement and also gratitude for this, to be able to do this with you two, and a level of awareness that, wow, there's more and more people on this journey. So that's how I'm checking out. Yeah.
Fantastic, man. I'm checking out with a level of excitement as well. Looking into this further, actually going through and progressing further with you as well by doing the workshop as well, and seeing the level of interest and excitement. But I'm also checking out with the excitement for the people out there listening who are going to be, maybe looking at something a little bit different. So, Jason, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's
great. Thank you for
brilliant chat.
Time too.
We could go on forever. Right. To everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed this chat, and look forward to talking to you next time. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks very much for listening. I hope you learn a few things, and really, really good to spend time with you Dan. And I look forward to sharing some more knowledge about this and helping people to get together so they can live communally.
Check out the workshops, and we'll talk soon.